right, listeners, buckle up. We're going deep on a true cinematic mystery today.
Oh, this is a good one.
We're talking about a lost Japanese film, Wasei Kingu Kongu, from 1933.
The same year the original King Kong came out.
Right, but get this.
What's that?
No known copies of this Japanese King Kong exist.
A true ghost story of the cinema.
Totally. Intriguing, huh?
Oh, for sure. And what makes this deep dive so interesting is we only have a few things to work with.
Yeah, like what?
Just some stills, a few old flyers,
Yeah.
and mentions in some old magazines.
So, like, trying to put together a puzzle with half the pieces missing.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got this lost film from 1933, but this wasn't like a monster movie, right?
Nope, not at all.
This King Kong was a comedy?
Comedic parody, yeah.
Haha, so different from the original.
Totally. While the American King Kong was scaring audiences.
With all those groundbreaking special effects.
Right. The Japanese, they went a totally different direction. They wanted to make them laugh.
I can already picture some guy in a gorilla suit stumbling around a tiny Tokyo.
Maybe.
But first, break down that title for us.
You mean Wasei Kingu Kongu?
Yeah, what's Wasei all about?
So Wasei, it doesn't just mean Japanese.
What does it mean then?
It's more specific.
Okay.
I mean, something is Japanese made, but the idea came from the West.
Like, they got inspired by something Western?
Yeah. Think of it like Japanese baseball.
Okay.
Came from American baseball, obviously. But
But it's got its own thing going on.
exactly. Different rules, different traditions.
So it's like their own version.
Yeah, you could say that.
So Wasei Kingu Kongu is like Japan's take on King Kong, but funny.
Right. Their own comedic spin on it.
Now think back to 1933. Japan was pretty isolated from the West back then.
Very true.
How did King Kong even get there?
That's the thing about the original King Kong. It was huge, even then.
Really?
Yeah, it just captivated people.
I guess everybody loves a good monster movie.
I guess so. But it was more than that.
What do you mean?
It had these themes, beauty, spectacle, the power of nature.
Hmm.
Those resonated across cultures.
So even in 1933, movies could be a global thing.
They could, especially a phenomenon like King Kong.
Okay, so this global phenomenon makes it to Japan and sparks a uniquely Japanese response.
Yeah.
Tell me about Wasei Kingu Kongu. What's the story? What kind of trouble was this comedic Kong causing in Tokyo?
Well, the story, it's about this guy named Santa.
Santa.
Yeah, Santa. And he's down on his luck.
Tough braid.
And he's totally in love with this woman named Omitsu, but...
There's always a but.
Right. Her father, he doesn't approve.
Why not?
Because Santa's broke.
Ah, classic rom-com setup.
Totally.
So how does Santa try to win over this disapproving dad?
Well, this is where that King Kong inspiration comes in.
I know it.
Santa, he gets this idea to capitalize on the whole King Kong craze.
Which was sweeping Japan at the time.
Yeah. So he creates a vaudeville act.
A vaudeville act.
Yeah, where he dresses up as Kong.
Oh, I love it.
Can you imagine him
Yeah.
stomping around on stage in a homemade gorilla suit?
Causing all sorts of hilarious mayhem.
Exactly.
So, was Wasei Kingu Kongu just a straight-up copycat?
Oh.
Or did they do something different with the King Kong idea?
Okay, so picture this, right?
Okay, I'm picturing it.
One night, Santa's doing his act, and he spots Omitsu in the audience.
Oh.
But she's not alone.
Who's she with?
She's with her new boyfriend.
A new boyfriend. Talk about bad timing.
And not just any boyfriend.
What do you mean?
This guy, he's rich.
Oh, no. Poor Santa.
So Santa, in a fit of jealousy, he jumps off the stage,
Still in the gorilla suit.
of course, and he chases them through the streets of Tokyo.
No way.
Oh, yeah. Can you imagine the pandemonium?
People running, screaming, thinking a real gorilla's on the loose.
Uh-huh. Exactly.
Okay, that's hilarious. So how does this crazy chase end?
Well, in the end, Santa's King Kong act, it becomes a huge hit.
Really?
Yeah, he becomes a success.
And Omitsu's father, is he happy now?
Oh, yeah. He's thrilled.
It's like the classic underdog story, but with a gorilla suit.
You got it.
But there's something kind of sad about all of this, isn't there?
Yeah.
We're talking about this film, Wasei Kingu Kongu, but we can't actually see it.
That's the tough part, right? It's a lost film.
And to make it even more, like, rooted in its time, it was a silent film, right?
Right.
It came out just as Japanese cinema was switching over to sound.
And sadly, like so many films from that era,
It's just gone.
it's a reminder of how fragile film is, especially those early films.
Yeah, so much lost to time.
War, neglect.
Imagine all the stories, the performances we've missed out on.
It makes you think, what else is out there waiting to be found?
Yeah.
Or, what else will never be found?
It's kind of a bittersweet feeling.
It is.
Okay, so no footage.
Right.
All we have are a few stills, those flyers you mentioned, and a couple of written accounts.
Pretty much.
Like trying to solve a puzzle with most of the pieces missing.
That's a great way to put it.
But even those few pieces can tell us something, right?
Oh, definitely. Like, there's this one still. It shows Santa in his gorilla suit towering over a miniature cityscape.
Wait, a miniature cityscape? Like some early stop-motion thing?
Not exactly.
Yeah.
Japanese filmmakers back then, they were super resourceful.
What to do?
They used clever staging, forced perspective to make it look like Kong was huge.
Oh, that's smart.
Right.
So they didn't have fancy effects, but they found a way to make it work.
They did.
Tell me more about that still. What else is in it?
Well, the detail in that cityscape,
Thought about it.
it's amazing. You can see tiny buildings,
Yeah.
cars, even people.
Like little miniature people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
like he created this whole little world for their Wasei King Kong to walk around in.
Wow, that must have taken forever to build.
I know, right?
What about the other still?
The other one.
Yeah.
It's a little harder to figure out. It's Santa again, still in the gorilla suit, but he's sitting on a stage.
Sounds like his vaudeville act.
Probably. And everyone around him is laughing like crazy.
Maybe he just did some amazing bit.
Could be, but look at the audience.
What about them?
They're dressed simply. Some even look kind of, ragged.
So like everyday people.
Yeah, working class folks. Which makes you think,
About what?
maybe Wasei Kingu Kongu, it wasn't just a silly comedy.
What else could it have been?
Maybe it was also about the lives of regular people in 1930s Japan.
Their anxieties, their hopes, that kind of thing.
Yeah. It's a reminder that even the silliest movies can be about real things.
Interesting. So you've got this comedic King Kong,
Right.
but it might also be reflecting something deeper about life in Japan back then.
Exactly. It makes you wish we could see the whole thing.
I know, right? Okay, here's a question that's been bugging me.
Shoot.
Could this film, even though it wasn't a monster movie,
Yeah.
could it be like a very early ancestor of kaiju films?
Like those giant monster movies Japan is so famous for.
Exactly.
That's a good question. It's complicated.
How so?
Well, the kaiju genre, like the real kaiju stuff,
Yeah.
it came later, after the war, during a time when everyone was, worried about nuclear weapons and all that.
Godzilla, right. A monster born from the atomic age.
Exactly. That's very different from a guy in a gorilla suit making people laugh.
So in terms of like what it's about, Wasei Kingu Kongu doesn't quite fit the kaiju mold.
I don't think so, no.
There's still a connection, right?
Oh, sure.
I mean, we're talking about giant creatures causing chaos.
Yeah, and don't forget, Wasei Kingu Kongu came first.
That's true.
It shows that Japanese filmmakers were already playing with the idea of giant creatures.
Long before Godzilla showed up.
Right.
So maybe not a direct ancestor, but part of a larger lineage.
Yeah, you could say that. It's fascinating to think about how these things connect.
How one film could influence another, even across decades.
Exactly.
So we've got this blend of comedy,
Yeah,
social commentary, maybe even those early hints of monster movie themes.
and it's all wrapped up in this mystery of a lost film.
Okay, let's dig into those stills a little more. What else can we learn from them?
We'll look at that image of Santa towering over the city.
The one where he's like King Kong in a world of tiny buildings.
That's the one. Remember how we were talking about forced perspective?
Yeah.
Take another look.
Okay, oh, I think I see it.
The way they angled the camera, the scale difference between Santa and the city.
It's really clever.
It is, but it's more than just trickery.
What do you mean?
The detail they put into that miniature city, it's incredible.
They must have built all those little buildings, the tiny cars.
Even the people, it's amazing.
It makes you realize how much effort they put into it.
Yeah, they wanted to make it believable, even if it was all a joke.
What about that other still? The one with Santa on stage?
You mean where he's surrounded by that laughing audience?
That's what was so funny.
It makes you wonder, right? What kind of jokes did they come up with?
I bet it was all physical comedy,
Oh, definitely. Big movements, funny faces.
slapstick routines.
They had to. It was a silent film.
So they couldn't rely on dialogue?
Right. They had to tell the whole story visually.
I bet they had a lot of fun with that King Kong suit, too.
Oh, I bet.
Finding ways to make it funny.
Well, I'm sure they did.
Man, I wish we could see it.
Me too.
But even just those little glimpses.
They give you a sense of the creativity, the humor.
The audacity.
Exactly. That's what
Yeah.
makes this whole thing so fascinating.
Yeah.
We don't have the full picture,
Right.
but we can still appreciate what they did.
Okay, so we've got the lost film, the history, the comedy.
Right.
What about the people who made it?
The filmmakers.
Yeah. What
Uh,
can you tell us about them?
Well, unfortunately, not a whole lot.
Oh.
The records aren't great.
We know who the director was, right?
Yeah, we know his name, but
But not much else.
right, details about his life and career are hard to come by.
It's kind of sad, all these people who put so much into making movies and
Yeah.
then they're just forgotten.
It's like they're the unsung heroes of film history.
So many talented people who just disappear into time.
Yeah. It makes you think about all the stories we don't know.
All the voices we've lost.
Yeah.
But even without knowing everything about the filmmakers' lives, we can still appreciate what they created.
Oh, absolutely. Their artistry, their contribution to this unique film.
And a hilarious film, I bet.
I'd imagine so.
Okay, let's talk about the technical side of Wasei Kingu Kongu.
All right.
We talked about silent film techniques, forced perspective, those miniature sets.
Mhm.
What else can you tell us about how they made this film?
Well, you got to remember, this was 1933.
Right.
Special effects were still pretty basic back then.
So they had to get creative.
Oh, definitely.
Okay.
But they did have a few tricks up their sleeves.
Like what?
Think about that chase scene through Tokyo.
You mean where Santa's chasing Omitsu and her new boyfriend in the gorilla suit?
That's the one.
Hmm.
To make it look chaotic, they probably used all sorts of clever techniques.
Give me an example.
I bet they sped up the film.
To make Santa look even crazier.
Exactly. Like he's zipping through those crowded streets.
Yeah. Bumping into people, knocking over carts.
Exactly. And imagine the reactions of the people he's chasing.
Oh, yeah, that'd have to be over the top.
Right, like a live-action cartoon.
It's too bad we can't see it.
It'll be amazing.
Okay, so trick photography, comedic timing, all those silent film techniques.
Right.
But how did they actually film Santa in the gorilla suit with those miniature sets?
That's a great question.
I know, right? Did they have some special stage or studio?
I wish we knew for sure.
Yeah.
But we can make some guesses
Based on what?
based on how films were made back then.
Okay, put on your detective hat.
All right, a front.
What are some of the possibilities?
Okay, so one possibility is that they used what's called a glass shot.
A glass shot. What's that?
It's when you paint a background on a piece of glass and put it in front of the camera.
So they could make it look like there was a cityscape behind Santa?
Exactly. It was a
Yeah.
common way to create backgrounds, especially big ones.
And especially when you don't have a lot of money. It makes sense they wouldn't have been able to build a whole Tokyo set.
Exactly. It's a reminder that filmmaking, it's always been about illusion.
Creating something that isn't really there.
Right. And in this case, they clearly pulled it off, even with limited technology.
They were resourceful.
Very much so.
Okay, we've talked about the visuals.
Mhm.
What about the music? Was there a score?
Ah, another interesting aspect.
It was a silent film, so there wasn't a soundtrack in the way we think of it today.
No, not a recorded soundtrack.
So what did audiences hear? Just silence?
Not quite.
What do you mean?
Well, silent films weren't actually silent,
What were they like then?
They usually had live music.
Live music, like someone playing in the theater.
Yeah. Usually a pianist or maybe a small orchestra.
So each screening would have had its own unique music.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
It is like a different performance every time.
Exactly.
What kind of music would they play?
They'd try to match the mood of the film.
Give me an example.
Like, if there was a chase scene,
Yeah.
they might play something fast and exciting.
Oh, okay. And if it was a romantic scene?
Then they'd switch to something more, tender and sweet.
So it was like the musicians were helping to tell the story.
Exactly. They were part of the storytelling team.
I wonder what kind of music they would have played for Wasei Kingu Kongu.
I know, right?
Yeah.
It's fun to imagine.
I bet they had fun with it too.
I'm sure they did.
Man, I wish we could go back in time and see one of those screenings.
Me too.
Okay, we've talked about the visuals, the music, the story,
Uh-huh.
but what about the impact of Wasei Kingu Kongu?
You mean like its legacy?
Yeah. Did it leave any kind of mark, even though it's lost?
That's a tough one to answer. It gets a little speculative.
I'm ready to speculate. What kind of impact could it have had on Japanese cinema?
Well, for one thing, it shows that Japanese filmmakers were engaging with Western pop culture.
Taking something like King Kong and making it their own.
Exactly. They
Yeah.
weren't just copying Hollywood, they were adapting it to their own culture. And that kind of creative adaptation, it became really important in Japanese cinema.
So even if Wasei Kingu Kongu didn't directly inspire other films, it might have helped shape a certain attitude.
A willingness to experiment, to blend different influences.
To take something from somewhere else and make it uniquely Japanese.
Exactly. And don't forget the comedy aspect of it.
Humor.
Yeah. Wasei Kingu Kongu, it showed a very Japanese sense of humor,
What do you mean?
one that embraces the absurd, the slapstick, the unexpected.
Like all those crazy chase scenes and Santa's antics in the gorilla suit.
Exactly. That kind of comedic energy, it continued to influence Japanese cinema.
So even though the film itself is lost, its comedic DNA might still be alive in Japanese films today.
That's a really interesting thought. It's like its ghost is still haunting Japanese cinema.
Okay, I'm loving this. Cultural exchange, comedic innovation,
Maybe even a bit of monster movie inspiration.
all from this one lost film.
It's amazing to think about.
Okay, now I want to dig a little deeper into the historical context.
Sounds good.
Earlier, you mentioned that Wasei Kingu Kongu might have reflected the lives of everyday people in Japan
Right.
in the 1930s.
Uh-huh.
Paint us a picture of what life was like back then. What were people going through? What were their hopes and dreams?
Well, the 1930s in Japan, it was a complicated time.
In what way?
Well, for starters, they were still dealing with the effects of the Great Depression.
Oh, right. The Depression wasn't just an American thing.
No, it was global.
Wow.
It hit Japan's economy pretty hard.
So a lot of people were struggling.
Yeah, unemployment was high, a lot of poverty.
It makes you think about the audience watching Wasei Kingu Kongu.
Yeah.
Maybe they saw themselves in Santa's struggles.
You mean the guy trying to make it, but held back by his finances?
Exactly. Maybe they found some comfort in his story.
A little bit of hope? A little bit of escapism?
Yeah, maybe they could laugh at their own troubles seeing them played out on screen.
It's possible.
And it wasn't just the economy, right? Japan was going through some big changes in the 1930s.
Yeah, they were modernizing, rapidly industrializing.
So a clash between the old ways and the new.
Exactly. Traditional values bumping up against new ideas.
It must have been a pretty confusing time.
I bet it was.
And you can see that in Wasei Kingu Kongu too, right?
Oh, definitely.
Santa, he's like this ordinary guy caught in the middle of it all.
Trying to find his place in a changing world.
And he finds success by embracing something that's both Western and Japanese.
You mean King Kong and the Vaudeville Act?
Yeah, like he's finding a way to bridge those two worlds.
Right. And maybe that's a message that resonated with the audience back then.
Like, you can be modern without losing your own identity.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this lost film can tell us so much about Japan in the 1930s.
It's like a time capsule.
Showing us a society in transition, facing challenges, trying to figure out its place in the world.
And finding ways to laugh along the way.
Which makes its loss even more, well, sad.
It does.
We've lost not just a funny movie, but a piece of history.
A window into a specific time and place.
It's like a missing chapter in the story of Japan.
Well said.
Okay, we've talked about the economic and social context,
Yeah.
but what about the political landscape?
Ah, well, things were pretty intense in Japan politically during the 1930s.
What do you mean?
Nationalism was on the rise. Militarism was gaining influence.
Oh, a lot of tension in the air.
Definitely.
It makes you wonder if any of that seeped into Wasei Kingu Kongu.
It's hard to say for sure, but it's possible.
Do we see any hints of that in the material we have?
Well, think about Santa again.
Our comedic King Kong hero.
Right. He's all about challenging the status quo, right?
He's a bit of a rebel.
Yeah. A trickster who uses humor to get what he wants.
And he does it all while dressed as a giant gorilla.
It's like he's subtly mocking authority.
Yeah. Maybe that audience back then picked up on that.
I bet they did.
Maybe they saw him as a kind of symbol of resistance, you know?
Against all the pressures and changes happening around them.
It's like even though the film was a comedy, it might have had a little bit of an edge to it.
Yeah, a little bit of subversion hidden beneath the laugh.
So maybe Wasei Kingu Kongu wasn't just a way to escape reality,
Right.
but also a way to comment on it.
In a safe, humorous way.
Exactly.
It's a reminder that comedy can be powerful.
That it can be more than just entertainment.
It can be a way to process difficult emotions.
To challenge the way things are.
To connect with others who are feeling the same way.
It's like laughter can be a form of resistance.
I like that.
Yeah.
Laughter as resistance.
Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the mystery of Wasei Kingu Kongu.
The big question.
Why is it lost? What happened to it?
Right? I mean, we know that a lot of early films are just gone.
Oh, yeah.
Lost to time.
Deterioration,
Again,
neglect,
accidents.
poor.
So is that what happened to Wasei Kingu Kongu?
It's definitely possible. especially considering World War II.
Right, Japan was heavily bombed during the war.
And a lot of their cultural heritage was destroyed.
Film archives,
It's
studios.
all gone.
So maybe Wasei Kingu Kongu was just a casualty of war.
It's a very real possibility.
But there's another theory, right?
Yeah. One that's a little bit more, well, specific to the era.
What do you mean?
You mentioned it before, something about the type of film they used back then.
Ah, yes. Nitrate film.
What about it?
Well, nitrate film, it was highly flammable.
Oh, right. I've heard about that.
It was basically a fire hazard.
Yikes. So a lot of those early films,
They just went up in smoke.
literally.
Literally. There were a lot of fires in film studios and archives.
I can imagine with all that flammable film lying around.
And sadly, a lot of those films were lost forever.
So it's possible that Wasei Kingu Kongu,
Went up in flames.
yeah,
It's a sad thought, but we can't rule it out.
it's a reminder that film is fragile
Very fragile.
and that we've lost so much already.
Too much, maybe.
Okay, so war damage, nitrate fires, any other theories about what might have happened to Wasei Kingu Kongu?
Well, some people think that it might have been recycled.
Recycled, you mean like they melted it down?
Not exactly, but
Yeah,
kinda.
I'm confused.
Okay, so back then, film stock was expensive.
Right.
And sometimes studios would reuse old film reels.
They just erase what was on them and film something new.
Basically, yeah,
Wow, that's kind of heartbreaking.
it is. But it makes sense, you know? Back then, they didn't always think of films as art.
Just as a product.
Yeah, some to be used and then discarded.
It makes you appreciate the work of film archivists even more.
Oh, definitely. They're the ones who try to save all this stuff from being lost.
The unsung heroes of cinema.
For sure. They're constantly searching for lost films.
Trying to piece together film history.
And sometimes they find something amazing.
Like a lost masterpiece that everyone thought was gone forever.
Yeah, those are the best stories.
So do you think there's any chance that a copy of Wasei Kingu Kongu is still out there?
It's a long shot.
But you never know, right?
That's true. Someone could find it in an attic, a basement.
Maybe even a mislabeled box in some film archive.
It would be incredible.
Like finding a needle in a haystack.
Exactly. But even if we never find a complete copy, we can still learn a lot from what we have.
Those stills, the flyers, the written accounts.
Yeah. They can tell us a lot about the film.
And about the time period.
Right.
Right.
It's like a puzzle. And even if we don't have all the pieces.
We can still see the bigger picture.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm not giving up hope. Maybe someday, Wasei Kingu Kongu will be found.
I hope so.
It would be amazing to see this lost film brought back to life.
It would be a cinematic miracle.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive.
We have.
We talked about the film, the history, the mystery.
Yeah.
But I want to circle back to something you said earlier.
What's that?
You said that Wasei Kingu Kongu might have reflected the anxieties and aspirations of everyday people in Japan in the 1930s.
Right, I remember.
It made me think about the power of film.
In what way?
Even a comedy, even a silly film about a guy in a gorilla suit,
Yeah.
it can still tap into something deeper.
Oh, absolutely.
It can reflect the hopes and fears of a whole society,
And it can connect with people on an emotional level?
even across generations.
Exactly.
So, Wasei Kingu Kongu, even though it's lost,
Right.
it still has something to teach us
What's that?
about the human experience
The power of storytelling.
and the enduring appeal of a good laugh.
Well said. And who knows, maybe someday, someone will find a copy of Wasei Kingu Kongu tucked away in some forgotten corner of the world.
And then we'll finally be able to see for ourselves what all the fuss is about.
That would be amazing.
It would rewrite film history.
For sure. It would be a major discovery.
Until then, we'll have to keep imagining.
And keep searching.
Exactly. The search is part of the fun, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
All right. That wraps up part 1 of our deep dive into the world of Wasei Kingu Kongu.
The 1930s in Japan. It was a politically charged era.
Oh, how so?
Well, you had this rising nationalism,
Okay.
and militarism was becoming more and more influential.
So kind of a tense atmosphere.
Yeah, you could say that.
It makes you wonder how all that affected the filmmakers.
Right. Like, did any of that political stuff make its way into the film?
It's hard to say for sure without seeing the actual movie.
True, but we can speculate.
Okay, let's speculate. Based on what we know, do you see any hints of that political climate in Wasei Kingu Kongu?
Well, think about Santa, the main character.
The guy in the gorilla suit?
Right. He's all about challenging the way things are.
He's kind of a rebel, you know,
Yeah, like a trickster figure.
who uses humor to get what he wants.
Exactly. And that kind of humor, that subversive kind of humor,
Yeah.
it might have resonated with audiences back then.
You mean people who were also feeling the pressures of a changing society?
Exactly. Like, maybe they saw Santa as a kind of symbol
Of what?
of, like, pushing back against authority.
Even though it's all done in a comedic way.
Right. It's not like he's leading a revolution or anything.
But he's still challenging the rules.
Yeah, and maybe that was enough for audiences at the time.
Like a way to laugh at the absurdity of it all.
Exactly. It's like, when things are tough,
Yeah.
sometimes you just need to laugh.
To blow off some steam.
Right. And Wasei Kingu Kongu maybe it provided that for people.
A way to cope with all the changes and pressures.
Through humor.
It's a good reminder that even in tough times, people still need to laugh.
Oh, absolutely. Laughter is important.
It can be a powerful thing.
It can bring people together, help them see things in a new light.
And maybe even inspire them to challenge the status quo.
Like Santa.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe Wasei Kingu Kongu wasn't just a silly comedy.
Right.
Maybe it was also a subtle commentary on the times.
A way to process the complexities of the world through humor.
I like that. Okay, let's get back to the mystery of the lost film.
The big question. What happened to it?
Yeah, why is Wasei Kingu Kongu lost?
Well, we know that a lot of early Japanese films are gone.
Lost to time, accidents, neglect.
War.
Right, World War II was devastating for Japan.
It was.
A lot of their cultural heritage was destroyed.
Including films.
So, is that what happened to Wasei Kingu Kongu? Was it destroyed in the war?
It's definitely possible. A lot of film archives and studios were bombed.
So, the film could have just been gone in an instant.
Yeah. It's a sad thought, but we can't rule it out.
It's a reminder of how fragile history is.
How easily things can be lost.
And how important it is to preserve what we have.
Absolutely.
But there's another theory, right? Something about the type of film they used back then?
Ah, yes, nitrate film.
Right, nitrate film. Remind me, what's the deal with that?
Well, nitrate film was highly flammable.
Like really flammable?
Oh, yeah, super flammable. It was basically a fire hazard.
Yikes.
And tragically, there were a lot of fires in film studios and archives back then.
So a lot of films were lost.
Countless films. Gone forever.
It's hard to even imagine the scale of that loss.
It is, isn't it? So much history, so much art just gone up in smoke.
And Wasei Kingu Kongu could have suffered the same fate.
It's possible. We can't rule it out.
It's a reminder of how precious these films are.
And how important it is to protect them.
We've already lost so much. Okay, so we've got war damage, nitrate fires. Any other possibilities? Any other theories about what happened to Wasei Kingu Kongu?
Well, some film historians believe that the film might have been recycled.
Recycled, what do you mean?
Well, back then, film stock was expensive.
Right.
And sometimes, to save money, studios would reuse old film reels.
So they'd take a reel that already had a movie on it,
Yeah,
wipe it clean.
and film something new over it.
Wow, that's kind of brutal.
It is, isn't it? But it was a different time.
They didn't think about film preservation the way we do now.
No, they didn't. Films weren't seen as these precious artifacts.
Just as products.
Yeah, something to be used and then discarded.
It makes you wonder how many films were lost that way.
Countless, I'm sure.
It's a reminder of how much we don't know about film history.
And how much we've probably lost forever.
Okay, so war, fires, recycling. Those are all possibilities.
Yeah.
But is there any chance, any hope at all, that a copy of Wasei Kingu Kongu might still be out there somewhere?
You never know, right?
Like, what if someone finds it in their attic?
Or in a basement.
Maybe tucked away in a forgotten film archive?
It's a long shot, but it could happen.
It would be amazing.
It would be a cinematic miracle.
Imagine this lost film suddenly reappearing after all these years.
It would rewrite film history.
People would be lining up to see it.
I know, I'd be first in line.
Me too. But even if we never find a complete copy,
Yeah.
we still have those fragments, right?
The stills, the flyers, the written accounts.
And those can tell us a lot.
Oh, absolutely. They're like pieces of a puzzle.
And even if we don't have all the pieces,
We can still get a sense of the bigger picture.
and that's pretty amazing.
It is.
Okay, I'm not giving up hope. Maybe someday Wasei Kingu Kongu will resurface.
I hope so too.
And we'll finally get to see this lost comedic masterpiece.
It would be a dream come true.
All right, let's shift gears a bit and talk about the visual side of Wasei Kingu Kongu.
You mean the way it looked?
Yeah, we've talked about forced perspective.
Right, using camera angles and scale to make things look bigger.
But I'm curious about other techniques they might have used.
To create that comedic effect.
Exactly. Silent comedies, they were so visually inventive.
They were. They had to be, right?
Yeah, they couldn't rely on dialogue.
So they had to find other ways to make the audience laugh.
What were some of their go-to moves?
Well, for one thing, timing was crucial.
Time?
Yeah, knowing when to cut to a different shot,
Yeah, okay.
when to speed things up, when to slow things down.
To build suspense, to create a surprise.
Exactly. And they were masters of physical comedy.
Slapstick routines, pratfalls, that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah. Exaggerated movements, funny faces, all that good stuff.
It must have been a lot of fun to watch.
I bet it was. And they were really good at using props and scenery in creative ways.
Like a chair could become a weapon.
Exactly. Or a ladder, or a pie.
I bet they had a lot of fun with that King Kong suit.
Oh, for sure. Imagine Santa trying to squeeze through a doorway in that thing.
Or tripping over a miniature building.
Yeah. It's a shame we don't have any footage to see how they used it.
But we can imagine.
We can. And that's part of the fun of exploring lost films.
Using our imaginations to fill in the gaps.
Exactly.
Okay, so silent comedies were more than just slapstick.
Oh, yeah.
They were an art form.
Absolutely. They required skill, creativity, a deep understanding of storytelling.
A big sense of humor.
Of course.
Now, we've talked a lot about the people behind the camera.
The filmmakers.
Right. But what about the people in front of the camera?
The actors.
Yeah. What do we know about them?
Sadly, not a whole lot. We know the names of the lead actors,
Okay.
but information about their lives and careers is pretty scarce.
Another mystery.
It is, isn't it? It makes you think about all the people who contributed to film history.
Whose stories have been lost.
Yeah, all those talented individuals who we might never know much about.
But even without knowing their full stories,
Yeah.
we can still appreciate their work.
Oh, absolutely. Think about the challenges they faced, acting in a silent film.
They had to convey so much without words.
Exactly. Relying on their expressions, their movements.
It must have been really demanding.
It was. They were pioneers in a way.
Pushing the boundaries of acting.
Finding new ways to communicate and connect with the audience.
I wonder what they thought about the film.
Yeah. What was it like for them to be part of Wasei Kingu Kongu?
What did they think about the character of King Kong?
About the whole idea of a Japanese film inspired by an American movie.
It's like a lost interview waiting to be discovered.
Wouldn't it be amazing to hear their stories?
It would. Okay, let's shift focus again.
To what?
The audience.
Yes, the people who actually watched Wasei Kingu Kongu.
How did they react to the film?
That's the big question, isn't it?
I mean, we don't have any reviews or box office numbers from back then.
No, sadly, a lot of that information is lost.
But we can still try to imagine, right?
Of course. We can use what we know about the time period
About the cultural landscape.
to make some educated guesses.
Okay, let's put on our historian hats. What do you think the audience reaction might have been?
Well, first of all, remember that King Kong was already a big deal by 1933,
The American film had come out.
and it was a huge hit worldwide.
So people in Japan would have already known about King Kong.
Yeah. So when Wasei Kingu Kongu came out,
They'd be curious,
I
right?
think so.
Mhm.
And then you add the element of humor.
The Japanese filmmakers took this iconic monster and made him funny.
Exactly. That must have been a surprise for audiences.
A pleasant surprise, I hope.
I think so. It's like they were taking something familiar
King Kong.
and making it their own.
Giving it a Japanese twist.
Right. And that probably appealed to people's sense of national pride.
Like, hey,
Like-
we can do this too, but we're going to do it our way.
Exactly.
So you've got this combination of familiarity,
King Kong,
novelty,
the comedic take on it.
and national pride.
It sounds like a winning formula.
It does. And don't forget the historical context.
That's right. Japan in the 1930s.
A time of economic hardship, social change.
And growing nationalism.
So maybe Wasei Kingu Kongu provided a bit of an escape for people.
A chance to laugh, to forget about their troubles for a while.
Maybe it even gave them a sense of hope.
Hope.
Yeah. Like even in tough times, there's still room for laughter and joy.
That's a nice thought.
It makes you wonder if the film sparked any discussions or debates among viewers.
Oh, I'm sure it did.
Like, what did people think about the film's message?
Did they see it as just a silly comedy?
Or was there a deeper meaning there?
We can't know for sure, but it's fun to speculate.
Maybe some people saw it as a commentary on Japan's relationship with the West.
Or on the changing roles of men and women in society.
It's like, even though the film is lost,
Yeah.
we can still feel its impact.
It's ripples in the cultural landscape.
You can imagine the conversations it might have sparked.
The laughter it must have elicited.
And that's pretty powerful.
It is. It shows that even a lost film can still have a voice.
A voice that echoes through time. Okay, we've talked a lot about the film's potential impact.
Yeah.
But I have one final question.
Go ahead.
It's a big one.
I'm listening.
We've talked about Wasei Kingu Kongu as a symbol of loss.
Right. The loss of a film, the loss of a piece of history.
And it makes me wonder,
What
what can we do to prevent this from happening again?
prevent other films from being lost?
Yeah. What can we do to ensure that the films of today, the stories that are being told right now,
Yeah.
that they don't suffer the same fate as Wasei Kingu Kongu?
That's a crucial question. And I think the answer is multifaceted.
Okay, break it down for us.
First and foremost, we need to support film archives.
Those institutions that are dedicated to preserving film history.
Exactly. Donate to them, volunteer, spread the word about their work.
So, put our money where our mouth is.
Yeah. And educate ourselves and others about the importance of film preservation.
Why does it matter? Why should we care?
Because films are more than just entertainment.
They're cultural artifacts.
They tell us about who we are, where we've been.
They document our history, our dreams, our fears.
Exactly. And if we lose them, we lose a part of ourselves.
So film preservation is about more than just saving old movies.
It's about preserving our collective memory
Our cultural heritage.
and ensuring that future generations have access to the stories that shaped us.
That's a beautiful way to put it. Okay, so we need to support archives, educate ourselves, and others. Anything else we can do?
I think we need to approach film with a sense of curiosity.
Curiosity.
Yeah. Be open to exploring different genres, different cultures, different time periods.
Don't just stick to the blockbusters.
Exactly. There's a whole world of cinema out there waiting to be discovered.
And by engaging with that world, by appreciating the diversity of cinematic expression,
Yeah.
we're helping to keep those stories alive.
And maybe, just maybe,
Yeah.
someday, someone will find a copy of Wasei Kingu Kongu tucked away in some forgotten corner of the world.
It would be a cinematic miracle.
It would. And it would be a testament to the enduring power of film.
And to the people who dedicate their lives to preserving it.
Exactly.
All right, that brings us to the end of part 2 of our deep dive into the world of Wasei Kingu Kongu. You know, it's really something how, even though this film is lost to time, we've been able to put together
Some semblance of it.
more than a semblance, I think.
True, we've managed to paint a pretty vivid picture.
Just imagine if you could magically find one lost film
Oh, wow.
from any era.
Any era.
Any era. What would it be?
Oh, that's tough. There's so many that come to mind.
I know, right?
You've got those silent epics,
Those early works by directors who become legends.
and then there are those cursed films.
The ones that vanished under mysterious circumstances, like the
Yeah.
possibilities are endless.
They really are.
Me, I think I'd go for some early animation.
Oh, cool.
Maybe a lost film by Winsor McKay or Lotte Reiniger.
Those would be amazing to see.
Imagine those hand-drawn worlds brought back to life.
They would be magical.
I know, right?
There's this British film from the 1940s, The Life and Death of Colonel Blimp.
I've heard of that one.
It was supposed to be this Technicolor masterpiece.
What happened to it?
Most of it was destroyed in a fire.
Oh, no.
Yeah, only fragments remain.
It's so sad to think about all the films that have been lost.
All those stories.
It's like these little doorways to forgotten worlds.
Exactly. They remind us how much we don't know about the past.
How much art and creativity has been lost to time.
And how much might still be out there, waiting to be rediscovered.
Yeah, it's exciting and heartbreaking at the same time.
It is.
So the loss of Wasei Kingu Kongu, it's not just about one film.
Right.
It's a reminder of the fragility of our cultural heritage.
How easily things can be lost.
And how important it is to preserve what we have.
Absolutely. We need to protect these films
Not just for ourselves, but for future generations.
so they can experience the magic of cinema.
And learn from the past.
Exactly.
Okay, I think we've covered just about everything.
Yeah, we've gone pretty deep on Wasei Kingu Kongu.
We've explored the mystery, the history, the comedy.
The cultural context.
And even though the film is lost,
Right.
we've managed to paint a pretty vivid picture of it.
Thanks to those few surviving pieces.
Now here's the big question.
What's that?
What does it all mean?
What do you mean?
What's the takeaway from all this? Why should we care about a lost Japanese film from nearly a century ago?
That's a good question. I think, for me, it's a reminder that even though a film is gone, its story can still be told.
And it can still resonate with us.
Exactly. Wasei Kingu Kongu may be lost, but we can still feel its presence
In Japanese cinema.
in the evolution of comedy.
In our fascination with giant creatures.
It's like its spirit lives on.
And it makes you wonder, what other lost stories are out there.
What other films are waiting to be rediscovered?
It's exciting to think about.
It is, and that's why the work of film archivists and historians is so important,
They're the ones who keep these stories alive.
who search for those lost films, those missing pieces of the puzzle.
It's like they're cinematic detectives.
Yeah. And sometimes they find something truly amazing.
A lost masterpiece that everyone thought was gone forever.
It happens. And those discoveries, they remind us that film history is an ongoing process.
We're constantly learning new things, uncovering new stories.
It's never finished, never complete.
So even though Wasei Kingu Kongu is lost,
Yeah.
its story is still being told.
And it's a story worth telling.
It's a story about creativity, about cultural exchange, about the power of laughter.
And about the enduring magic of cinema.
Well said. Well, I think that about wraps up our deep dive into the world of Wasei Kingu Kongu.
It's been a fun one.
It has. Thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery.
And for sharing your expertise with us.
And to our listeners,
Yes.
thank you for listening.
Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep that cinematic curiosity alive.
We'll catch you next time for another fascinating deep dive into the world of lost media.